3 years ago, she laughed while taking down my company. This year, she signed a deal that gave me everything she thought she owned. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not because I wasn't invited, I was. Not because I couldn't afford the dress, I could. But because people like me weren't meant to stand in rooms like this and make others nervous without saying a word. This was the annual Denton and Rhine Gala part, holiday party part, power peacocking, entirely political. And I was a junior associate barely 6 months in. No one expected me to show up. Certainly not her. The champagne was flowing. Everyone laughed just a little too loudly, like they were trying to prove something. There were conversations happening that could shift careers in 3 sentences or less. So I stayed near the bar, quiet, observing, exactly where they expected me to be, which is exactly where I needed to be. That's when she noticed me, Miranda Hall. She arrived 40 minutes late, as always, like time waited for her. Her dress was black satin cut to precision. Her heels made no sound on marble, but her presence did. A dozen heads turned the moment she entered. Miranda didn't command attention. She collected it like it was owed. She made a slow loop through the room before her eyes landed on me standing alone with my untouched glass. I saw the flicker of confusion first, then calculation, and then that polished, perfect smile. She walked straight toward me alone. "Didn't expect to see first years tonight," she said, tone almost warm. Almost. I smiled, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Didn't expect to be remembered." She laughed, polite, practiced. "I remember talent. But there's quiet, and then there's forgettable. Don't blend too far into the walls. I'll keep that in mind." "You should. This floor eats people who wait to be invited to speak." The words were a warning or a dismissal. Sometimes with Miranda they were the same thing. She glanced around, then leaned in slightly. "You've got that look, eager, grateful, harmless. Use it while you can. It wears off." Then with a soft pat on my arm, she turned and walked away, greeted by another partner before she'd even taken 3 steps. I didn't respond. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Because I wasn't standing there to be seen. I was standing there to watch. And now she'd given me what I came for: confirmation. She didn't recognize me. Not even a twitch of familiarity. Not a pause in cadence. Not a flicker of that razor-sharp memory she's so proud of. I was a blank page to her, which meant she had no idea what she was standing on. Miranda Hall had destroyed people with less effort than it took her to order a drink. She knew how to win before the other side realized they were in a fight. And now she thought I was just another fresh face lucky enough to orbit her gravity. But she didn't know what I remembered. She didn't know what I still carried. She didn't know that the signature she once scrawled without looking, the one she thought was a formality, was where all of this started. And more importantly, she didn't know she was about to sign again. This time the paper would look familiar, boring, routine, unthreatening. And this time she'd hand me everything without even realizing she was losing it. I took a sip of the champagne, still untouched, still bitter. Around me the crowd pressed in, more laughter, more politics, more leverage in glass flutes. Miranda disappeared into the center of the room where stories were told and deals were hinted at. She looked untouchable, and yet she had already made her first move. A careless comment, a throwaway insult, a signature memory that would mean nothing to her by midnight. But to me, it was the start of page 1. She didn't remember the first contract. That's what made it so poetic. She had signed it casually, flipping through pages while tapping her pen, distracted by a call she'd taken mid-review. She didn't even ask questions, just assumed her version of the document had been followed word for word. It wasn't. And it cost me everything. We were a small company back then, niche legal tech, bootstrapped, hungry. Our goal wasn't to compete with giants. We just wanted to survive where they didn't even notice us. We'd developed a back-end tool to automate risk analysis inside corporate contracts, the kind of thing that helped startups negotiate smarter without needing 600 an hour legal fees. But someone did notice. A larger firm, bloated, outdated, threatened, filed an IP suit that made no real sense, but sounded terrifying in a courtroom. And they hired her. Miranda Hall. She didn't even take the first call with us. She sent a junior, let us think we had a chance at resolving things amicably. Then her real strategy arrived, disguised in motions delays, late-night filings, procedural traps, and 2 weeks' worth of discovery that buried us alive. We were 3 people in a WeWork. They were Miranda, I remember staring at a clause in the response brief, something she'd cut and pasted from another case, but misapplied to ours. I flagged it. Our attorney blinked and said, "Yes, it's flawed, but you won't get the chance to argue that. You'll fold before then." And we did. Investors pulled out before we made it to deposition. Our co-founder resigned, and I was left with the cleanup, alone. The final meeting was a blur, not legal, just administrative. We were finalizing the wind down. There was a last agreement to sign. IP reversion, personal liability waiver. Miranda sat across from me, flanked by 2 associates, and passed the packet without looking up. I signed. So did she. She didn't read past the first paragraph. That was the first time I saw it up close, the flaw. Not in the law, in her. She didn't read when she thought she had already won. Her strength was speed, reputation, instinct. But instincts get lazy. That's when I realized Miranda didn't just beat me with logic. She beat me with volume, with structure, with confidence. And that meant she could be beaten too. But not by pushing, by watching. The week the company died, I packed everything into 3 boxes and moved out of my co-working desk. I paid the last 2 contractors from my savings. Then I disappeared, legally, quietly, changed my last name back to my mother's maiden name, shut down my online presence, killed my resume, vanished from every place I used to be found. And in that silence, I began again. Not in startups, not in tech, in contracts. I took low-level work document review translation red lines for junior firms who didn't care who you used to be, as long as you delivered edits on time. I delivered, and I kept building a file. A private one. Miranda Hall language patterns, clauses, behaviors, blind spots. I had no intention of using it. At first, it was survival. But as the pattern grew clearer, so did the strategy. She had a rhythm. She used the same 3 templates in 80% of cases. Her annexes rushed. Her NDA formats recycled. Her confidence absolute. She wasn't lazy, she was predictable. And predictable people can be baited. 2 years in, I heard she'd taken on a corporate partner role. More deals, fewer courtroom battles. A power move, they called it. It was an opportunity. And when I saw Denton and Ryan hiring mid-level litigation associates, I didn't apply under my old name. I didn't mention the startup. I framed my 2 years of contract work as a pivot from visionary founder to pragmatic technician. The truth, I wanted access. The kind that let me hand her another contract and see what she'd missed this time. HR didn't blink. No one remembered me. Why would they? Miranda never looked twice. On my first day, she passed me in the hallway, sipping her coffee, half on her phone. "Welcome," she said. "Keep your red lines sharp and your ego quiet. You'll be fine." I smiled. Understood. And just like that, I was back. Not to be seen, not to be forgiven. To write a better ending. She didn't chase things. Miranda Hall wasn't the type to follow opportunity. She made it orbit her. That's what made it so easy. I didn't need to lure her. I just had to look interesting enough. Not obvious, not loud. Just successful in a way she didn't fully understand but wanted credit for. By month 4 at the firm, I had settled into a rhythm. Low profile, high output. The kind of work Miranda noticed when it made her job easier and forgot the moment it was done. She still didn't recognize me, but she remembered that I was efficient. That word came up twice in her comments on my reviews. And it was all I needed. The startup, the one I used to own, didn't die, not completely. A former contractor had taken what we could salvage and spun it into something leaner, less ambitious, smarter. It wasn't mine anymore, not on paper, but he still sent me drafts, updates, clauses to proofread. And one afternoon when I was reviewing a licensing agreement during my lunch break, I made a decision. I left the document open, on my work laptop, visible, just long enough. She passed by the glass conference room, paused. I didn't look up. 30 minutes later, I got a Slack message from her, "You moonlighting for someone I should know about." I waited 10 minutes, then replied, "Not formally, just helping a friend avoid bad paperwork." She replied, "Friend looks funded." I said, "Getting there." Then came the line I'd been waiting for. "Tell them if they're ever looking for real counsel, they know where to find me." I smiled at the screen. I didn't tell them. I waited a week. Let it sit. Let her think. Then casually mentioned in the hallway that the team was starting to explore advisory structures, and wanted someone who could think creatively outside the constraints of formal firm representation. Her eyes lit up, because Miranda hated sharing credit, and outside the constraints meant off the record. Discretion's not a problem, she said, especially if there's upside. There it was, the shift. From mentor to opportunist, from advisor to investor, she wanted in. She didn't ask about the details. She didn't want to see the full pitch deck. She just wanted access early enough to say she was there before it took off, but not so early that she had to do the groundwork. Classic Miranda. We arranged a call. I told her I'd be looping her in as a strategic voice, not on the cap table, but in the room. She agreed. Casual, confident, certain. But she wanted something more, just draft up something light. Advisory clause? Maybe a bonus structure if things go big. I nodded. Sure. You want that under the firm? She laughed. God, no. This is personal. Off-grid. Perfect. So I drafted it. Clean, simple, nothing threatening. A 2-page advisory agreement, with a single-page annex, labeled Optional Equity Provision, subject to advisor conduct. It was written plainly, nothing fancy, just precise. Inside that annex, Clause 4.1 was a condition. In the event of any material misrepresentation, failure to disclose conflicts of interest, or inappropriate use of confidential materials, any implied equity advisory privileges or related entitlements will revert fully to the entity founders without contest. She didn't ask about it, didn't mention it, didn't flag a single sentence. She signed it the next morning. On her phone. I watched the e-signature come in. Time-stamped, logged, no edits, just arrogance. She assumed that because I used plain language, it couldn't hurt her. She assumed that because I didn't push for her name on the front page, I was being deferential. She assumed she was in control. And she thanked me. You're smart, she said. You don't play the game like the others, you just wait. I smiled. Waiting is a strategy. She laughed like it was a compliment. But what she didn't know was that she had just handed me the switch. And all I had to do now was wait for her to flip it. She flipped it faster than I expected. I had planned to wait. Weeks, maybe months. Let her circle the edge. Let her believe she was shaping something that was already finished without her. But no, she couldn't help herself. 2 days after signing, she forwarded an internal email from our founder marked confidential to a contact at a boutique VC firm. Not her firm, not even our legal rep. Just someone she wanted to impress. Someone who could owe her a favor. She didn't blind copy. She didn't use a burner account. She just forwarded it straight from her personal Gmail. With one line, thought this might be of interest. Let me know if you want a warm intro. I wasn't copied, but I didn't need to be. The founder sent me a screenshot immediately. Subject line, timestamp, message chain, everything. Is this supposed to happen? No, but I told him to hold. Do nothing, say nothing. I wasn't surprised. Miranda didn't operate in whispers. She moved like the room owed her permission. So I started logging. Every access, every edit, every time she opened a shared file and renamed it without checking metadata. I saw when she pulled language from our internal strategy docs and dropped it into a template she sent to someone on the side. I saw when she adjusted an internal milestone projection, bumping it by 20%, adding a new legal contact that of course was her. And I watched her start copying me on fewer and fewer emails. That was the most telling part. She wasn't just testing boundaries. She was claiming territory. She thought this was hers now. She thought the signature she gave me, the one buried in that little advisory agreement, was just a formality. Something I wouldn't invoke. She forgot it was built to be a trigger. Clause 4.1 In the event of any material misrepresentation, failure to disclose conflicts of interest, or inappropriate use of confidential materials. No warning required, no arbitration, no second chance. Just reversion, clean, legal, immediate. It was too easy. So I made it harder. I set up a call, just her and me. Said the founder wanted to clarify expectations around advisory input. Nothing hostile, just alignment. She didn't even flinch. Don't worry, she said. I've been in this position before. People get nervous when things move fast. I'll handle it. Handle it. She meant steamroll it, charm it, own it. She didn't know I'd already looped in our general counsel. Didn't know I'd created a secure audit trail for every file she'd touched, every message she'd rewritten, every PDF she renamed without permission. She didn't know I was watching. And I wasn't hiding either. I was just silent, letting her talk, letting her overreach, letting her burn her own path through a field that didn't belong to her. The real irony, she started using our name, my name, in meetings I wasn't even invited to, pitching herself as a silent strategic advisor, hinting at equity without authorization, offering access to a company she wasn't authorized to represent. It wasn't ambition, it was entitlement, and every step she took was another checkbox. By the end of week 2, she had sent proprietary data to third parties, represented herself as legal authority without documentation, pitched a funding round that didn't exist, and edited 2 internal policy documents directly without request. It was breathtaking, and it was all documented. I had the email headers, the access logs, the auto-tracked changes, even a recording of a Zoom call where she talked over the founder to promise strategic legal cover to a potential partner. I didn't confront her. I didn't correct her. I sent a thank you email after the call. That was all, because she hadn't just flipped the switch. She'd broken the fuse box. And now the contract wasn't a promise. It was a weapon, and I was done waiting. I didn't plan some grand reveal. No confrontation in the boardroom. No dramatic screaming match. Just one email. With 3 attachments. That's all it took. It was a Monday. The kind of gray, muted morning where the world feels like it's holding its breath. I sent it at 7:12 a.m., before meetings, before anyone could say I had acted in emotion. There were no exclamation points, no accusations, just structure. Subject advisory agreement, clause 4.1, activation notice, body per terms agreed upon in the advisory agreement dated month day. And following multiple material violations of clause 4.1, the reversion clause is now in effect. Documentation attached. Please direct all further communications through counsel. Attachment 1, the contract she signed, with her digital signature, date stamped, verified. Attachment 2, a clean chronological log of every action tied to the violations. Emails, file edits, meeting minutes, access trails. Attachment 3, a summary statement from our counsel, pre-reviewed, pre-approved, confirming the trigger clause had been breached, confirming the reversion of all rights. That was it. No theatrics, no CCing the world, just 3 recipients. Our founder, general counsel, and Miranda herself. I didn't sit back after I sent it. I didn't gloat. I went to work. By 10:17 a.m., the founder responded, received. Executing transition internally. Thank you. By 10:42 a.m., legal confirmed clause 4.1. Clause 1 had taken effect, and Miranda's advisory status had been officially revoked across all documentation. By 11:30 a.m., Miranda replied. 2 words, very clever. I didn't answer. Not out of spite. Out of respect. Because she finally saw it. Not the betrayal. Not the outcome, the structure. She saw how it had always been built to collapse, not with a bang, but a line of clean, measured text. She'd walked into a contract she thought she controlled, but I wrote it. And the law protects what's written, not what's assumed. That afternoon, I was called into a closed-door meeting with HR and our firm's internal ethics officer, not as a suspect, as a witness. They'd received a separate report, one initiated by the startup founder. Details about Miranda's behavior, her self-declared representation, her use of internal legal email accounts for private gain, her altering of investor-facing language. It wasn't about the contract anymore. It was about the system she tried to work around and got caught inside. I answered every question they asked, politely, succinctly, factually. They thanked me for the documentation, said I'd handled the situation with remarkable professionalism. I nodded, said nothing else. Because professionalism wasn't the point. This wasn't about being professional. It was about being exact. That night, I walked past Miranda's office. Lights off, door closed. Nameplate still there for now. She wasn't in. She wouldn't be for a while. 2 days later, an internal memo went out. Effective immediately, Miranda Hall will be on administrative leave pending a review of recent advisory conflicts and non-disclosure violations. 3 sentences, 12 lines. She was erased faster than I'd ever imagined. And still, I didn't feel triumphant, because this wasn't a win. This was a reckoning. The quiet kind, where no one shouts, where no one claps, where the most dangerous person in the room is the one you didn't bother to read carefully. They offered me a promotion, said I'd handled a sensitive situation with discretion and clarity. I turned it down, not because I didn't want it, because I'd already won something else proof. That power doesn't have to shout, it just has to be signed. For a while, nothing happened. No hallway whispers, no gossip, just an empty office, a paused nameplate, and an uncomfortable silence no one wanted to explain. In this firm, people don't fall. They shift, they relocate, they step back to pursue other ventures. That's how the legends get buried gently, politely, with just enough distance to protect the brand. But Miranda Hall was different. She wasn't a whisper, she was a storm. And storms don't disappear. They collapse. The memo had gone out: administrative leave pending review. Simple, non-committal. But internally, the ripples had started. The founder she overstepped had officially filed a complaint through external counsel, citing contractual misconduct, non-disclosure breach, and reputational damage. The firm had no choice. And that meant someone had to start digging. Week 1 of the review, old advisory deals she'd handled were re-examined. Week 2, someone flagged a conflict of interest clause she'd violated on a previous M&A filing. Nothing criminal, just convenient omission. Week 3, 2 junior associates stepped forward. One had been asked to retroactively alter a timestamped draft. The other told to forward a red line under Miranda's name, even though she hadn't reviewed it. Little things, individually survivable, together a pattern. She hadn't just overstepped once. She had built a career on assuming she was untouchable, and no one had stopped her until now. Because now her confidence was on paper, and her signature was in my inbox. People around the office stopped saying her name out loud. Meetings were reshuffled, files reassigned, deals restructured. The longer she stayed silent, the louder her absence became. I saw one of her longtime allies, a partner named Reed Duck, out of a meeting when HR walked in. Another removed her name from a cross-departmental proposal without explanation. It wasn't betrayal, it was survival. She'd built her empire on intimidation and brilliance, but once the brilliance was questioned, there was nothing left to protect the rest. Not when every bold decision could be reread as recklessness. Not when every closed-door moment could be interpreted as manipulation. People who'd once praised her now shrugged. She moved fast. Too fast sometimes. Honestly, I always wondered how she kept up with that many clients. Revisionism. The oldest trick in self-preservation. But I didn't join in. I didn't feed it. I didn't need to. Because her silence spoke louder than I ever could. She didn't fight the clause, didn't threaten legal action, didn't try to claw her way back into the project she'd tried to dominate. She knew what she'd signed, she knew what it meant. And for the first time in her career, she was bound by the very thing she used to weaponize: paper. A month passed. Then came the second memo. Effective immediately, Miranda Hall will be exiting Denton and Rhine, LLP. We thank her for her contributions. No send-off, no photos, just gone. Her nameplate disappeared the next day. Her LinkedIn went dark a week later. The legal industry didn't release an article, but people noticed. Whispers made it to clients. Some started asking questions. And in the kind of industry where trust is traded like currency, reputation dies long before the resume does. I ran into her once after that. Not planned. I was getting coffee before work, same corner spot I'd used for months. She walked in behind me. No assistant, no blazer. Just a long coat, sunglasses, and a look I didn't recognize. Not shame, not regret. Just clarity. She didn't say anything, neither did I. But as I turned to leave, she held the door for me. For a split second, our eyes met. No tension, no hatred. Just two people who had once shared a table. Only now we both finally understood who was writing the terms. I didn't look back. Not because I felt victorious. Because I had other work to do. The founder, the one Miranda tried to hijack, he'd offered me a real position. Not just as counsel, as partner, co-owner. A chance to build something real, again. But this time, protected. This time, no one would sign without reading every word. I didn't win. Not in the way people think. There was no trophy, no announcement, no crowd to clap. She left. I stayed. And for a while, that was all anyone needed to know. But behind the quiet, something shifted. In meetings, people listened when I spoke. My ideas didn't have to be repeated by someone louder to get noticed. Clients stopped looking for the senior in the room before making eye contact. Power moves differently when it's earned. But I wasn't chasing power. I never was. I was just holding the door open, for myself. The same door Miranda once tried to slam shut without realizing I was already inside. The founder called me 2 weeks after the dust settled. The startup, the one Miranda tried to co-opt, was ready to relaunch its advisory board. This time, for real. "We want you in officially," he said. "Not just as counsel, as builder." There was no hesitation. I didn't need to run it by anyone. Didn't need to ask if it would interfere with my firm track. Because I wasn't on a track anymore. I was writing the route. We structured it differently this time. Cleaner, tighter, no ambiguity. Every clause was reviewed twice. Every signature came with understanding, not assumption. No hidden annexes. No poetic justice. Just real binding clarity. The way it should have been the first time before Miranda ever stepped near it. At the firm, no one questioned my transition. They didn't dare. They'd seen the aftermath. They knew what I had done even if no one said it aloud. Some pretended not to notice. Others congratulated me quietly, like I'd survived a storm no one wanted to admit had ever happened. But the message was clear: don't cross the quiet ones. One afternoon, a junior associate I barely knew stopped me in the elevator. "Is it true about the contract? That you wrote it, I didn't confirm or deny." I just smiled and asked, "Did you read the one you signed when you joined?" She blinked. "I think so." I nodded. "Good. Think twice next time. Not as a threat, as a gift." Because that's what Miranda never understood. People don't need to be destroyed. They just need to be reminded. Read carefully, act deliberately, and never underestimate the one who says the least. I cleared out my desk the next day. No drama, no final speech. Just a small box, 2 folders, and a coffee mug I'd never actually used. As I passed the reception desk, the admin looked up and said, "You're really leaving?" "I was never staying," I replied. And that was the truth. This was never meant to be my final stop. Just the place where I made sure no one else could erase me again. At home, I opened the first contract I ever wrote, the one Miranda signed, the original. The paper was faded from time, but the signature still held weight. She'd thought it was hers, that because she'd signed it without looking it couldn't hurt her. But it wasn't the ink that mattered. It was what she didn't read. That's where power lives, in the space between the lines. I folded the paper, placed it back in the drawer, and turned off the light. No frame, no fire. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing. I didn't ruin her. She did that herself. All I did was hold the door open. She called me weak. That's how this started. Not with a slap, not with sabotage. Just 7 words said in passing with a smile. "You've got that soft look, not built for this." She didn't mean to wound. She didn't think I'd remember. But I did. Because people like her always mistake volume for dominance, presence for power, and silence for surrender. They think if you don't speak, you've accepted your place. If you're careful, you're scared. If you're kind, you're naive. And if you're quiet, you're nothing. That was her first mistake. Her second thinking contracts only protect those with louder lawyers. I never raised my voice. Not when she humiliated me in front of colleagues. Not when she copied my ideas and pitched them as hers. Not even when she tried to hijack a company I helped build again. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my standard. The day I left the firm, someone from HR asked if I wanted to schedule an exit interview. To talk through what you've learned, where you're heading next. I said no. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because everything that needed to be said was already written. Signed, dated, executed. There's something poetic about a woman who built her career on contracts being undone by one she didn't read. She thought she was the closer, the one who sealed the deals, wrote the endings. But sometimes the quietest one in the room is the one holding the last page. And when she read mine, it didn't matter that it was written in plain language. It didn't matter that it didn't scream or threaten or beg. It mattered because it was final, because it was hers, because it was fair, and because it was enforceable. I didn't destroy her. I didn't leak stories, didn't call reporters, didn't post passive-aggressive quotes online. I didn't have to. All I did was let the system she once weaponized do what it was designed for. She played the game like it was hers, and lost by the same rules, not because I changed them, but because this time, I wrote them. Some people still whisper about it, call it career sabotage, say I set her up. But let me be clear, I didn't set her up. I set boundaries, and she crossed them, willingly, arrogantly, repeatedly. All I did was make sure the boundary had consequences. That's not revenge, that's design. People ask if I feel satisfied, if it was worth it, if finally watching her fall made the pain from 3 years ago fade. But justice isn't always catharsis. Sometimes it's just knowing that no one else will ever have to sign blindly under her name again. That some other junior associate, the kind who reads late into the night, who redlines with trembling fingers, who believes in fairness even when the system won't be erased. That's enough. That's everything. And me, I'm not loud, still don't like crowds, still prefer documents to declarations. But I don't flinch when people underestimate me anymore, because now I know something Miranda never understood. Power isn't who walks into the room first. It's who still controls the story after everyone else has left. She called me weak, but weakness doesn't build traps. Weakness doesn't write contracts that hold in court. Weakness doesn't sit through humiliation without blinking and walk away with everything that matters. She mistook quiet for surrender. She'll never make that mistake again. No one will. Because I'm not weak. I'm just unread until it's too late.